Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in. I am Kaylee Batesman, the Content Director at She Can Code, and today I have the fabulous Aishling Meyler, who is the Senior Director, Software Engineering at LexisNexis Risk Solutions Insurance UK and Ireland, to discuss the importance of stepping outside of your comfort zone and knowing that knowledge comes from making mistakes. Welcome, Aishling.
Thank you, and thank you for having me today. I'm really excited for the chat.
Good, thank you so much for joining us this morning, because it's a topic that we haven't had before on our podcast. We talked a little bit about how ladies can gain confidence, but we're yet to talk about volunteering, putting yourself forward and stepping outside of that comfort zone. To kick off today's conversation, can we hear a little bit about yourself and your background, please?
Yep, so as you said, I'm Aishling Meyler and I'm a Senior Director of Software Engineering at LexisNexis Risk Solutions. So my degree many years ago was in computer science, and from there I moved into development, so over 23 years ago. I've spent about half that time in a development role, and then from there I moved to team lead to where I am today. So today I look after several teams of engineers who develop software solutions for the insurance industry, specifically looking at risk.
Did you, when you were at school, did you think I want to go into technology, or is it something that you kind of fell into?
I think I fell into it. I didn't, I
knew
nothing. Yeah, I knew nothing about computers. I liked maths. Maths was my thing. So my career guidance teacher was saying, oh, if you like maths, this computers should be good. So I was kind of like, okay, great, we'll give that a go. And even starting college, and there was a small number of females in the class, but we had to go get a floppy disk to save our projects on. We hadn't a notion. We were going into the shop asking for a floppy disk and wondering what it even looked like. So literally hadn't a clue when I started off.
we hear it often, and we do like to hear the routes that people make it into technology on here, because occasionally you do get a lady that says, yes, I had a plan and I wanted to go into tech. Yeah. But as we hear so often on here, there are so many routes in. And we find that really encouraging, that ladies find their way into tech in all different paths. You're a big advocate for putting yourself forward for things. How do you think this has helped your career?
So I think I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't started doing that. And I know early on in my career, I guess for a couple of reasons, I was in startup companies where you do a bit of everything anyway, but didn't put my hand up. But I think it was because I didn't realize that other people were. So I guess if you're in a situation where people are putting their hands up and you're not, people aren't perhaps considering you for some of those roles. And it was several years ago, I was part of a Women in Tech mentoring program that was kicked off in the company. And it was that first mentor that kind of said, you need to put your hand up, even if you're not sure you can do something. Even if you're not sure it's for you, she said, you need to put your hand up and say you're interested, because otherwise the opportunities don't always come. Like, you still do get opportunities, but I think you don't get as many opportunities. So I think that putting my hand up, and I literally do end up putting it up in the air half the time, is really important, because otherwise people don't know that you're interested. They might think you're happy where you are. So I definitely wouldn't be, I might be further along the path, but I don't think I'll be as far as I am now if I hadn't done that.
Yeah, I suppose as well, you're right. If you don't put your hand up ever, I think perhaps your team or your manager would just always assume that you're not up for any opportunity.
Yeah, that you're happy where you are. Yeah, and you're content. Yeah.
I'm not saying put your hands up for things that you really don't want to do. Don't put your hand up for everything you really don't want to do. But yes, occasionally just showing that you're willing to come out of your comfort zone a little bit can't hurt, obviously. Putting yourself forward, especially early on in your career, it can be very daunting. So do you have any advice for anyone who is feeling overwhelmed?
Probably a couple of things. I think one, have more confidence in yourself. I think we're all really bad at kind of having confidence in ourselves and putting ourselves forward. But I think as well, what's really important is kind of having a little circle around you, be that your manager, colleagues, peers, that can kind of encourage you as well. I think it's really important to build that little kind of almost like a little village around you, where you've got people that can kind of, you can talk to, you can kind of say, hey, I've seen that come up, or you can have those open and honest conversations, even if it's just the people around you, or if it's a mentor, But I think having that circle can give you that confidence you need to kind of, you know, put yourself forward then.
Do you find as well things have got easier for people working from home and being remote? I think sometimes I used to think before COVID, if I didn't want to put my hand up for something, or even, you know, just voice my opinion in a meeting, even sometimes things got a little bit easier after COVID and working from home and being able to feel, you know, you're on equal ground with everybody in a meeting because you're on Zoom or you know, whatever it is that you're using. Have you found that a little bit easier, perhaps, to have the confidence to step forward and put yourself forward for something because, you know, you're remote?
I think for me, it hasn't made any difference. I guess as part of LexisNexis Risk Solutions in the UK and I, we have, you know, about 4 different locations. So a lot of our work was a little bit remote before anyway. You know, I'd be working with people in different offices. So while we would have people in our Dublin office, I'd be working remotely, and my managers in some cases would have been remote. So for me, I don't think that's had a particular difference. Sometimes I think people remotely are a little bit slower to put their hands up because you can't, in some cases, see their face. You know, it's easier to sit behind the screen and not put your hand up. Whereas if you're sitting in a room and you're looking around at people, people can almost feel the pressure to volunteer.
Yes,
So
someone's
in some
eyes
ways,
are burning on you.
yeah. So I think in my teams, I probably see less putting up of hands. Now we're more virtual. But for me personally, it hasn't made a difference.
Yeah, there's always found it different, interesting with the way that the dynamics changed. I worked at an office at the time where I went in 5 days a week, and we were a small team, and it was a nice atmosphere anyway. But like yourself, going home didn't seem to change too much for us. But I did think, actually, in terms of just the dynamic of the team, maybe those that were slightly more quieter seemed to get a little bit more airtime than they would have when we were in the office and everybody was sitting together, and you've got the noisy salespeople that seem to pitch in with everything. And then we had a couple of very quiet, very talented developers who might not pitch in on certain things, or feel that they had enough airtime to speak sometimes, so let alone put themselves forward for an opportunity.
Yeah.
So I suppose it depends on the team, really, doesn't it, and what you're used to.
Yes, yeah, it does. And the people, some people like that when they're not face to face, they do have a little bit more confidence sometimes.
Yeah. And do you have any tips on feeling more confident or projecting confidence? I suppose that can be harder if you're not in a room and you don't have that body language, do you?
Yeah, again, probably a few things here. I think from speaking to people about this, I think you come across way more confident than you realize. And I happened to be speaking to someone yesterday, and she was saying she didn't like presenting, and we were talking about an offsite where we were presenting. And I was really surprised. I was like, oh, you always come across so confident. And she was like, no, I hate it. So I think people do generally come across more confident than you appear. So I think try not worry about it as much, and be really prepared. I think the more prepared you are on your material, whatever it is you're talking about or presenting, you will be more confident, because if you know your stuff, you're happier to talk about it. And practice. If you don't, you know, practice, do the presentations, speak up on the calls, you need it to become normal and part of what you do. So the more you do it, you will become more confident kind of naturally, even though those first few times, oh, everybody's listening or everybody's looking or I said something stupid. Do it anyway, because the only way you're going to learn is by maybe making the mistakes, you know, and then the next time doing it better. But I think to get more confident, it really is practice. You're not going to be confident the first couple of times, but with the practice, that will come over time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right as well. It's that worry that everybody's watching. Everybody might think that not only might I make a mistake in my presentation, but people might think, actually, I don't look confident, or, you know, perhaps I don't know what I'm doing. And I think sometimes as well that it, as you say, practice. And I found practicing in front of somebody that will give you very honest feedback, almost brutal feedback, because you're right, you don't always know how you come across to other people. And if somebody says to you, actually, you come across, you seem quite nervous, or there's something about you that perhaps you could tweak a few things, I remember doing recordings when I became a reporter years ago. We recorded our interviews so we could watch them back. And I remember that is when, you know, my editors started pointing out to me, you fidget. And I was like, right, I hadn't even noticed that I was fidgeting. And I was rocking on, you know, my heels, or I was sort of fidgeting in the chair. And when you're sitting with somebody in person, trying to make them feel comfortable and interview them, I'm clearly feeling nervous on the inside, and it was showing on the outside. And it wasn't until somebody, you know, quite honestly said to me, you look nervous because you're fidgeting, sit on your hands, I don't care what you do, but, you know, just be mindful of how you come across. And you're absolutely right, though. It is sometimes you don't realize, you have no idea. You're worried so much about your presentation, whatever it is you have to say, and that you completely forget to notice, you know, any sort of body language or the way that you talk or anything like that.
And like that, even for presentations, it's not good enough. I've realized now it's not good enough to stand in front of your computer and say it out loud to yourself. Grab your friend, your husband, your children, whoever it is, and just get them to sit there and listen, and they will pick out those things that you're doing that are a little bit odd.
Yes, or that doesn't make sense. Or I used to go through a phase of forgetting to say my surname. So I sounded like Madonna, where I would just say my first name and not even realise that I, you know, hadn't said my full name. And until somebody pointed it out, I think, oh my gosh, actually, I'm not a pop star. I need to introduce myself. But yeah, little things that you just don't notice. Absolutely right. And children would give you great feedback.
Very honest feedback. Yeah, very honest.
That's a great tip. What if you put yourself forward and the project fails? How do you move past that?
So my biggest failure ever, and I still remember it very clearly to this day, was a huge project that we were doing. But I would still say I wouldn't be where I am today if it hadn't been for that project. You know, it was a huge project. It was a huge failure in terms of timelines, getting the work out the door. And we did bring it back on track. We brought it back on track. But it almost felt like, you know, in the space of 6 months, I'd gained like 4 years experience. You know, so that failure, you know, you hear it. I've heard on, you know, listening to other people talk about their careers that, you know, there's no mistakes, there's only ways to learn. But definitely if I look at that project, you know, over those 6 months, I grew so much, I learned so much. And even during those failures, I still remember as well, some of the more senior people in the company happened to be around, and they took the time, came over and told me about their failure projects, you know, their big project that failed, which was really, really nice to kind of know, actually, yeah, things have gone wrong, we're bringing it back on track. But nobody was, you know, there was a variety of reasons of why it failed, but nobody was kind of looking at the failure. They were kind of looking at, right, how are we going to come out of this? What are the lessons he's going to learn? And I do say that to my leads. Sometimes they get a project, I go, look, this is going to be hard, but trust me, the learnings that you'll get out of it, it'll be worth it, because you'll grow so much quicker. If you don't get those challenging projects and don't get the failures, you don't get those lessons to learn. You don't realize what to do better the next time. So it's hard, it's daunting, and particularly when you're in the middle of it, it's really bad. But to try and remind yourself, and other people, like if you're working with someone else who's going through that, to try and remind them that these failures are actually what's going to help you grow. If everything goes, you know, I tell my kids that, sure, if you get everything right, how are you going to learn? And it's the same. If you don't have those failures, you'll grow, but I don't think you'll grow as quickly. I think they really kind of push you to kind of grow.
Yeah, and being on a team that allows you to have that feeling and to grow. And I think I've been on teams where, you know, something goes wrong and, you know, it has consequences. Obviously things have consequences, but not to the point where the team is just completely put down, and then you immediately think to yourself, well, I'm not going to put myself forward, I'm not going to do anything again, I'm not going to try, we're not going to grow as a team. And then on the opposite end, I've been on teams where, you know, mostly American teams, funny enough, who are always kind of try new things and do things and have confidence, you know, put yourself forward. And those sort of teams, you know, you really just you come up with ideas and you try new things, because you know that if it does fail, it's as you say, they look at it as, you know, how can we learn from this, instead of making you feel like you're an absolute terrible person for having done it in the first place.
Yeah. And even that was a really tough project for everybody. There was a lot of late nights and stuff, which, you know, we don't really like to do. But during that project, nobody left the team. Everybody was on the same page of, right, we can turn this around, we can get there, and we did. And then after, it was kind of like a 2-year-long project. Then people start moving on to other companies, other places within the company. But it did feel like, you know, there was a huge accomplishment when we got to the end of it, which was lovely.
Yeah.
So failure is good, even though it doesn't feel like it.
No, it doesn't feel like it at the time. It's so interesting as well to see the dynamic of your team when something goes wrong as well, and to see, you know, if you've got colleagues, or suddenly you notice people, if you're a manager and you notice people on your team who throw each other under the bus, and it's so interesting to see, you know, it wasn't me, she done it, you know. Had to see, you know, whether or not you group together and you help each other out, and you just get through it. And like you said, without that mistake, you never actually get to see, you know, how you work in a crisis, and pull together instead of blaming other people, and, you know,
because that gets you nowhere. It doesn't get you anywhere. And I think even that, I mean, as a leader, making sure that people feel safe to fail, because you know, otherwise people cover up mistakes, or they're not maybe pushing the project or themselves far enough. So it is important for people to realize that, you know, if you fail, you're not in trouble. It's kind of right, okay, that's happened. How do we resolve it now? How do we learn from it? How do we kind of fix it and stuff? So yeah, it is important for people as well to get that support when it happens. And definitely in that case, I got lots of support, and I still remember it now. I remember the failure, but I remember the support that came with it as well, which is nice.
Yes, which makes you want to stay at that company longer, do more for them. You know, you get far more out of somebody where you've really supported them, rather than putting them down and they immediately start renewing their CV. I'm off. We talk a lot about burnout and mental health. Is there a fine line between being good for your career or and volunteering too much?
Yes, I think there is. I think for me, you know, there's a very kind of clear difference between work and personal life. You know, I've got a family, I've got, you know, young enough kids, and the work-life balance for me is everything. So if I don't have that work-life balance, I'm not going to stay where I am. And I know that about my teams as well. So, you know, if you're already overwhelmed, you know, you should be letting your manager know you're overwhelmed, and you should be kind of getting that support. But if you're overwhelmed, you know, putting your hand up to say, actually, I need help, as opposed to, hey, give me more stuff, you know, taking on more stuff, because you're not going to be able to do it kind of properly. And it is really important. We were at an offsite last week, actually, and one of the presenters we had was kind of talking about his career journey and talking about it in 4 areas, like that you need to want to do something, the skills to do it, but also you need to have that work-life balance, which is really important. So the not working late consistently. There's always times that you might need to put in some extra hours to get something done, but, you know, having that work-life balance, making sure you're finishing on time, and making sure you've got your family time, you're making the important family events. And for me, I think once I feel I have that balance, then I don't feel kind of overly stressed. I don't feel kind of burned out. But I think it is important for people. Yeah, you can't be kind of putting up your hand and then suddenly work until midnight to get stuff done, because you can't work effectively that way. So yeah, putting up your hand in that case is to put up your hand and say, I need help, as opposed to, hey, give me more stuff.
Yes, and then as well, you stop enjoying the things that you do, don't you? You think, I've put myself forward for too many things, I'm not enjoying it if you're working till midnight. So you're right, it's a balance, isn't it? You're involved in a Women in Tech mentoring program at LexisNexis Risk Solutions. How important is having a mentor for your career?
It's really good. I think in LexisNexis Risk Solutions, we're really, really lucky in so many ways. LexisNexis Risk Solutions are part of a much wider RELX group. So there's lots of other companies involved. So when they run any of these programs, they run them across the whole group. So when I first done my mentorship in that pilot program when they started it years ago, my mentor was someone from a different part of that group. So they knew nothing about me. They knew nothing about my managers, the people I worked with, nothing about the business. So it felt like that really safe space where you could have those honest conversations and not be worried about who you might upset, or, it was a really, really good. And that mentor program started as a pilot and still exists today, and now is open to, there is a women in tech one, but there's a general mentor mentee program across the company. But it's really good to be able to kind of get that perspective from someone who's not involved in what you're doing. So that relationship, that you can be really open and honest. But also the piece that I find really useful is you can get those mentors from other parts of the company who may be doing similar things. You can take your lessons from them. Oh, how are you doing that? And you can kind of actually get information that can help bring what you're doing on your side of the company forward as well. So I think it's really important to kind of have those mentors outside the company, but not just one. If you don't have a mentoring program in your company, you can still kind of go and ask people. I've gone and asked people, hey, you're doing this, I'm interested in it. Can you take an hour a month to spend time with me? And people don't really say no. They kind of, they're happy because they get something from it as well. They can learn something from you. So I would advise anyone to go and get at least one mentor. If not, different, you can have ones for different reasons. If you get me, you can have ones for maybe your personal development, or you might have another one who's helping you with it. They're in a similar area maybe to what you're working in, and you want to learn from them. But we're really lucky here, as I said, that we have that program and that it's run across all the companies, which gets us that, different perspective. So it's really, I think the mentor stuff, that was the one that taught me to put my hand up. So, I've only good things to say about it.
Yeah, and that's great advice, having somebody that isn't involved in the politics of your company.
Yeah,
This person knows that person, and they have that bird's eye view. And you're right, even if there's if just people knowing people and then talking about that particular person, you think actually somebody might have a different view on things, and there might be some bickering involved, and you think, I really don't need all of that. I just need you to tell me what you think I should do in terms of career, and where to move forward next. So that's great advice, finding somebody outside of your company. But do you have any advice on finding a mentor then, if whether they're outside your company or internal?
I suppose you kind of have to look at, when I looked for that first mentor, things I wanted to improve on what I was working around was around process. We were 4 kind of smaller companies acquired by LexisNexis, and we were kind of coming together. So we needed to get some good processes in. So I think when I was filling out, we had like a form to fill out on what we were looking for. I was looking for help in kind of defining processes. Now, if I was looking for a mentor, I'd be looking for something different. So I think you need to know, what is it that you want to improve on? What is it that you want to do next? And kind of almost like look up a little bit and go, oh, that person's doing what I want to do. I can have a chat with them to see what are the steps they've taken to get there. So you do need to have an idea of what you want out of the mentor relationship, because when you go into those calls, you need to be able to tell them, I need help with this or with this. They're not going to, I don't think, come into the call and suddenly giving you loads of advice, because they need to know where it is you kind of want to focus on, because you do need to focus on an area. So I think if you're looking for a mentor, you need to work out what's the next thing you want to work on, and then look and see who can perhaps give you that help. And ask your manager as well. Your manager will know people as well, or should know people, across the company or even externally, and be able to kind of guide you. Well, actually, I think if you want to work in that area, so and so will be a really good person to help you with that.
I mean, it's a mentor is invaluable, obviously, but finding one, I think, can be incredibly difficult. You don't want to be that person that just kind of walks up to somebody that you've only met, once or twice, and say, "Would you be my mentor?" Slightly forward, and as you say, really using that time as well to the most, because nobody wants a wasted phone call with somebody kind of an hour a week where neither of you really achieve anything. So I suppose setting that agenda and knowing what you want to get out of it. While we're on the topic of mentors, do you have any amazing female role models as well, or anyone that you would love to be your mentor? But for me, that's Michelle Obama, but she's not going to be my mentor.
I don't know, actually. I don't, I work with some amazing women and have done, and continue to do. Aspire to be someone? I don't know. I think if I look back maybe on my family, my roots, where I've kind of come from, I feel my mom, my grandmother, my aunts, they're really strong women. If something needs to be done, you get on and do it. There's no limits or anything. But also, always there to help, being just really, really kind of kind. And I think for me, it's that roots that I want to kind of stay true to, because I think it's really important as you kind of work that you stay true to those. So I probably don't have someone I want to aspire to be. I guess I want to be me, but keep really, I suppose, keep to those roots that, you can do whatever you want. There's no blockers, but do remember, to be that nice kind of person, help others. So yeah, probably not an aspire, but yeah, something I just want to stay true to, I think.
Yes. Yeah, that's I know that feeling. You lead a team of software engineers at LexisNexis Risk Solutions. How do you keep them motivated when you're working on challenging projects for the insurance industry?
It probably depends on the project. So, everybody in technology wants to work on the latest and greatest, and that's not always the things that, we have to work on. Sometimes there's legacy things that bring in the revenue. So I guess it's about making sure they're aware of the bigger picture. While you might be working on this today and it might not be what you want to work on, or like that difficult project I talked about, showing them the bigger picture, showing them the end game, showing them the what's next, I think is important. I think making sure you're not asking people to do anything you wouldn't do yourself, for me, is kind of key, like that to my core kind of values of, you don't ask someone to do something. I might not have the technical abilities today because I haven't coded in some time to do it, but not asking someone to do something you wouldn't do yourself. Like I remember in that project that went wrong, I wasn't coding at the time, I was leading, but still making sure I was there when they were working late, if there was anything I could do to help, removing the blockers. So I think just making sure they know you're there, that they can fail, that it's not their fault if they fail, supporting them, showing them the bigger picture, and making sure you're having the conversations of, okay, if this isn't, if this is a challenging project, this is probably what's coming next. Are you interested, not interested? And trying to make sure that they can see a way out of the challenging project, because you can't stay on a challenging project for forever. There has to be kind of an end point. So just making sure they're aware of that and what's coming, I think is important.
Oh gosh, yes, finding an end point or showing them that there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Gosh, yes,
because I think people are happy to work hard, and people are happy sometimes to work late for a particular reason, and knowing the reason, but you can't abuse that kind of niceness, or that you have to show, well, actually there's an end point here, and we're going to fix it or make it better or move on to something else.
This isn't your everyday life at this company.
Yeah.
It's just, this is how we deal with hard times occasionally. And absolutely. It's so important to somebody's mental health. We are nearly out of time, so I've got one more question for you. How do you encourage members of your team to put their hand up?
So a bit like some of the other stuff, having those conversations with them. What is it they want to do? What is it they want to do next? What is it they're interested in? And having those conversations, I suppose, consistently. So when those opportunities do come up, oh, well, we didn't have an opportunity for that person then, but I think they might be interested in this next one, and having those conversations again. And making people realize that, just because you put your hand up for something, even in my case, it doesn't mean you always get it, but at least people know you're interested, and they can help you to go, well, actually, this time it didn't work out for whatever reason, but let's, whether it's skills or time, let's change things so the next time it can be okay. So I think that's all around communication, conversation, and making sure that you're having the conversations of what is it that you want to do, and what, where do you want to go?
Yeah, I suppose people pick up on a vibe from their manager, don't they? Whether or not they feel, from what they've seen happen to people in the past, whether or not I can put myself forward and it be okay, or whether or not that person is going to go off on one if it all goes incredibly wrong.
Yeah, and I said we're a really big, LexisNexis Risk Solutions are part of a much bigger company, and there are those there's lots of jobs, and supporting people to go, well, actually, if you put your hand up, and if it's not in my team, that's okay, because everybody has to grow themselves. And if that growth isn't available here, I'm happy to support someone to do it somewhere else as well, because we all need to do what's right for us at the end of the day, because you have to be happy. So making sure to support people that, if their hand goes up and it's not within your team and it's somewhere else, is still supporting them and kind of getting them to their goal and their dream is important as well.
Yeah, and good companies, as you said, they know how to hold on to good talents. So why wouldn't you help them in other areas? Aishling, thank you so much. We're already out of time. So thank you for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it as well, and I'm more than happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to everybody listening, as always, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again next time.